Avengers: Secret Wars could have been one of the biggest casts in MCU history, and the actor who played Colossus in Fox's X-Men movies recently talked about his chances of joining the fight. Kelsey Grammar, who played Hank McCoy in a quick cameo in 2014's X-Men: Days of Future Past, recently said that he would like to play the character again at least once in the MCU. Then, another actor from the first 3 X-Men movies said that he also wanted to be in the MCU. However, his role has become a little more complicated over the last few years. Avengers 6, ex-Colossus men's actor addresses if he'll appear in the MCU Secret Wars. In the next few years, the X-Men are expected to join the MCU for the first time. For Avengers 6, Marvel Studios is said to be planning to bring in as many mutant actors from the past as possible, and since that movie is coming out in just a few years, and the X-Men are slowly moving from the Fox movies into the MCU timeline, the actors from those movies have been asked if their characters will be in the Phase 6's Avengers event. Daniel Cudmore played Colossus in the first 3 X-Men movies and in X-Men: Days of Future Past. However, Stefan Kapicic took over the role in both of Fox's Deadpool movies. In a recent Instagram post, Cudmore answered a question from a fan who wanted to know if he would be back as Colossus in Marvel Studios' Avengers: Secret Wars. Simply put, he told the fan, "Absolutely, if they ask me." On a different Instagram post, another fan told Cudmore that he should come back as Colossus. Cudmore said, "Cheers to that." In February 2022, Cudmore talked to the YouTube channel Traversing the Stars about what he had heard about Colossus coming back through the multiverse and other MCU characters coming back. Even though he hadn't heard anything since his last appearance in Days of Future Past in 2014, he doesn't see why Marvel shouldn't bring back those heroes since there are so many great characters in that universe. I don't know anything. I don't know how that will turn out because after Days of Future Past was done, that was the last one I did. And then, with everything that happened with Deadpool, I don't know if I would go into that world and play. But I don't see why they shouldn't just bring back the X-Men. There are so many great people in that world. The movies are so good that they can stand on their own. But like all these gigantic ensemble features with all the characters, like why not? Why not let them come in? Will OG Colossus return for Secret Wars? If the rumors are true, Marvel seems intent on gathering as many actors from previous Marvel movies together as is humanly possible for Avengers 6, which would make it the most epic comic book movie that has ever been made. And it seems like Daniel Cudmore would be happy to put on the mocap suit once more and bring his version of Colossus back into the mix, if the studio asked him to play his role again, no matter how small it was. This is assuming that the studio would ask him to do so. It appears for the first time being that Stefan Kapicic will continue playing his own version of Colossus in Deadpool 3, which is scheduled to be released in the year 2024. On the other hand, now that Hugh Jackman has been cast as Wolverine, the movie will begin to investigate all aspects of the multiverse. When you factor in the Time Variance Authority, it's possible that Wade and his Colossus will come face to face with Cudmore's interpretation of the hero from back in the day. The version of the hero was notorious for violating the fourth wall and wreaking havoc. However, it would not be surprising to see this version of Colossus team up with his veteran teammates from X-Men and the most well-known characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Avengers 6. Who else will be in the film with them, and how big a production it'll end up being can only be determined in the future. Next up, Avengers 6 bringing back every Marvel hero would be a huge mistake. Bringing back every hero in Avengers: Secret Wars would be a big goal, but it would be a big mistake for Marvel to try to do it in Phase 6. Nothing concrete has been established about the plot, but if rumors are to be believed, Secret Wars could be poised to include not only the full current lineup of MCU heroes, but also all the Avengers that came before them, and more. According to these unconfirmed rumors about the 6th Avengers movie, the studio wants to include almost every major hero from the MCU. Plus, it's said that Secret Wars will bring in heroes from other franchises. So, in theory, Chris Evans' Captain America and Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man could join forces with one of the Fox's X-Men teams, Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider, and one of the 2 Spider-Men who came before Tom Holland's. So, this is supposedly how Marvel plans to beat Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. But even if Marvel did go in this direction, it would be the wrong choice for Phase 6. This is why. Avengers 6 can't accommodate more heroes than Endgame. As long as the actors are available, Marvel could bring back any character at once, because the MCU is based on the idea of a multiverse. It doesn't matter if the Marvel character it wants is dead or in the wrong movie universe. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and Spider-Man: No Way Home showed that Marvel can just make an alternate Earth where the characters it wants to use, like Iron Man or Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, are alive and well. But even though it has all the tools it needs to put together a huge group of heroes for Secret Wars, going in this direction would cause a lot of problems with the story. Endgame has a huge cast, which shows how hard this approach would be. Endgame had so many heroes that some of them had to play small parts. That makes sense, since it was unrealistic to think that every character would get the same amount of attention. The same thing happened in Infinity War. Even though Hawkeye was one of the original Avengers, there wasn't enough room for him in the movie. Also, Captain America and Black Widow only had a few minutes of screen time. If these movies couldn't keep track of all all the characters, it's hard to see how Secret Wars will do it any better. By the time the movies come out, there will be a lot more characters in the MCU than there were in Phase 3. In addition to the Avengers, they'll have the Eternals, She-Hulk, Shang-Chi, the Fantastic Four, the Thunderbolts, and more. Plus any character it might bring from outside the MCU. Adding heroes or villains from the X-Men movies, from Fox, or the Spider-Man movies from Sony will only make the problems worse. Avengers 6 needs to outdo Endgame, not by going bigger. It makes sense that Marvel would want to top Endgame, which is exactly what it should do. But going bigger isn't the answer. Infinity War and Endgame showed that there are risks to filling a movie's cast with MCU characters, because some fan favorites will have to be underused. It can, however, still tell epic stories like Endgame, and give a lot of surprise along the way. High-stakes stories don't have to have a lot of people in them. The Avengers just need a smaller group of heroes to save the worlds. The premise of the Secret Wars comics shows how this movie could work as an MCU crossover, and how it can get around the problem of having a large cast. In the comic, a cosmic being called the Beyonder used his powers to bring together characters from all over the Marvel Universe. Beyonder picked the people who were there, so there weren't very many heroes who could join the adventure. So, instead of bouncing full teams with Avengers and X-Men, it was possible to use people from each group. If Marvel uses this as a model for Secret Wars, it can put together an interesting group of heroes that isn't too big to handle. Not every MCU character needs a Secret Wars return. It's essential to keep in mind that it's not necessary for every character to appear in another Marvel Cinematic Universe film. For instance, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, story arc for Iron Man had satisfactorily concluded. In the movie Avengers Endgame, he made the decision to sacrifice himself in the decisive battle against Thanos. This brought an appropriate conclusion to his story, so there is no need for him to return at this time. The same can be said about a significant number of its characters who were from various worlds. Both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield had previously stated that Spider-Man No Way Home would be their final opportunity to play the role of Spider-Man. Hugh Jackman is set to reprise his role as Wolverine in the upcoming film Deadpool 3, and Professor X was featured in the sequel to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange 2 proved major cameos don't always work. The Marvel movie that could have had the biggest cameos from other characters in the MCU is a good example of how this strategy can easily fail. When Doctor Strange 2 brought in the Illuminati and added characters like Marvel's What If, Captain Carter, Anson Mount's Black Bolt, and John Krasinski's Mr. Fantastic, it kept surprising people. Normally, a group as unique as this would be expected to do well with audiences, but some of those cameos were very disappointing. The MCU putting Reed Richards in a live-action movie could have been a big deal, but people didn't like how the hero was portrayed because it wasn't like them. If Marvel's goal with Avengers Secret Wars is to bring back beloved characters, the best way to do that would be to do what Spider-Man No Way Home did, with just a few Spider-Man villains from Sony's movies and 2 other versions of Peter Parker. No Way Home was able to tell the biggest Spider-Man story ever seen on the big screen. People thought that Marvel would find room for even more Spider-Man characters in the movie, but it turned out that having only 3 Spider-Man as the main characters was better. By sticking to a similar pattern, Avengers Secret Wars can do a good job with 1 or 2 returning characters, without taking away from the MCU's current heroes. Unfortunately, guys, that is all the time we had for today. Who should play Colossus if the character is to join the MCU? Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Till next time, cheers!